So the UFC is back in the Apex again this week for the main event. Font and Marlon Vera. We've got 12 fights this weekend, and again, is it the best card? Let's be honest, it's not. I mean, there's some fights on here, but yeah, it's not great. But we've got Font and Vera in the main event. It's a good main event. And then Alexander Romanov and Sherman has been rescheduled for this week. We've got Arlovski again fighting another younger heavyweight. Will he probably win by decision? Most likely. And we've got again at 12 fights on this card. And folks, if you haven't yet, make sure that subscribe button down below for more UFC here on the channel. We should have our PFL regular season week 2 predictions coming out tomorrow. But yeah, let's get into it. And last week, just a pretty midweek for us. We went 6-5. Now, given we probably should have gone 6-4, actually 7-4 if good old Dean Barry didn't decide to go poke Mike Jackson in the eye. And Mike the Truth Jackson is now 1-1 with 1 no contest in the UFC. 6-5, then we got the main event right with Jessica Andrade. Took some chances, like taking Clay Guida and taking Montana De La Rosa. Those two did not hit. But anyway, 6-5, not a horrible week. Let's really try to bounce back, though, this week with Font and Vera. So we open the card with Taira taking on Carlos Candelario. And for Taira, I mean, undefeated so far at 10-0, coming into the UFC, his first appearance with the promotion. He's only 22 years old. He's been fighting in Japan a lot. And yeah, he's really good on the ground, has a lot of good submission victories, and has been pretty much untouchable so far outside of the UFC. And he's fought some pretty good competition as well. You look at his last fight, winning by rear naked choke in the first round. That was in November of last year against a guy who was 6-2 at the time. Before that, beating a guy who was 12-5-1 by triangle choke in the first round. And then before that, beating a guy who was 38-18-3 by rear naked choke in the first round. So he's fighting decent competition over in Shoot, though, and all those promotions that he is seeing over there in Asia. And he's taking on Carlos Candelario, the first ever fighter to be signed off the Contender Series on that very night, coming off a loss. He had that split decision loss to Victor Altamirano. Now, Altamirano's now in the UFC, and he couldn't get the win over Carlos Hernandez, a split decision win that they gave to Hernandez. I thought Altamirano won, but that's all right. But Candelario had 2 shots in the Contender. The first one he won back in 2017. Didn't fight for 4 years after that, then won on CES, picked up a win by unanimous decision, then came back, turned it around against Altamirano, coming back down to flyweight, lost by split decision, but now he's getting the shot against Tatsuto Taira. As for Candelario, though, his last fight against Altamirano, it was pretty close. I took that one, I think, on relatively short notice, and that was a factor of him getting the contract. But it was a pretty close fight. He was able to land takedowns in his own right, and Altamirano was as well. But it's a pretty solid fight on the feet. Candelario had the advantage on the ground in that fight, which is interesting because considering his first fight in the Contender, he did get taken down 8 times in that fight, but was able to keep the fight standing. And when that fight was on the feet, he was the aggressor and was pushing the pace up there. But in this fight, I think Tatsuto Taira is just all around better. Definitely, I think he's going to try to get this fight on the ground, and I think Taira does have the advantage down there. Like, maybe pure wrestling-wise, Candelario might be a little better than Taira, but I think once Taira is able to drag this one on the ground, he should be able to go in there and get a submission. So I'm going to go with Tatsuto Taira to submit Carlos Candelario in the opener by a second-round submission. And now we've got Gina Mazany and Shayna Young. As for Shanna Young, though, her last 2 fights have both been losses. She's 0-2 in the UFC. Came in, took on Meerschaert. I mean, that's not an easy fight at all. Chasson goes in there and beats her by unanimous decision. Chasson just able to outstrike her, even out-wrestle Shanna Young in that fight, too. And then Young's second fight in the UFC, she got finished by Stephanie Egger on the ground. Egger was able to land takedowns and then work her ground and pound with those elbows and put away Shanna Young in the second. So Young is 0-2 in the UFC. She's taking on Gina Mazany, who honestly hasn't been great either in the UFC. I mean, she's got 2 wins. It's the first one back in 2017 over in China. She beats Wu Yannan by a unanimous decision. And then she beats Rachel Ostovich, who is no longer in the UFC and now is a bare knuckle fighter. Is she still boxing for them? I don't know. She beat Paige Van Zandt, and I haven't heard anything from Rachel Ostovich since. But Mazany goes in there. She beats Ostovich. She actually finishes her in the 3rd round. But again, you know, Rachel Ostovich just isn't the best. Mazany's able to out-wrestle her. She's able to out-strike her. It wasn't a competitive fight. But now you look at Mazany's last fight, though. It's against Priscilla Cachoeira. And Cachoeira is not great by any stretch of any imagination. She's not very good. Like, okay, she barely beat Ji Yeon Kim, which she didn't really win that fight if you go watch it. She's not very good. And Priscilla Cachoeira beats Gina Mazany. Mazany kind of tires towards the end of that 2nd round because she's very wrestling heavy early in that fight. This is back at UFC 262 in Houston. She's very wrestling heavy at the beginning of that fight, but in the second, she does start to tire, and Priscilla Cachoeira is able to take advantage of that, really work on her output and her volume, and eventually she put away Mazany in the second with strikes. So Mazany's coming off that loss. In between the Wu Yannan and Ostovich wins, she drops the fight to Lena Landsberg by unanimous decision. She gets finished in 1 minute and 49 seconds by Macy Chasson. Julia Avila finishes her in 22 seconds, and then she beats Ostovich. Gina Mazany's not very good. Shanna Young's not very good. I mean, you just got to pick one here and just hope. Like, don't put money down on this fight. The odds we're looking at about -150 for Mazany, +130 for Young. You got to take the slight favor here, I think, in Gina Mazany, just because Shanna Young hasn't showed anything so far in the UFC, because the Egger fight, she's kind of got beat everywhere. In the Macy Chiasson fight, it's a tough fight, don't get me wrong. And yeah, she lasted longer against Chiasson than Mazany did, because Mazany only lasted 2 minutes against Chiasson, but I mean, Shanna Young was just kind of dominated from pillar to post in that fight. Really couldn't get anything going. She got taken down at will in that one. Chiasson with 9 minutes of control time in that fight. Yeah, we're gonna go Gina Mazany. Not confident at all, but I think Mazany is able to execute her wrestling, because you look at Shanna Young's first 2 fights in the UFC, and even her fight on the Contender 2 against Sarah Alpar. Alpar's able to take her down twice. She submits her. Chiasson's able to take down Young, keep her down for 9 minutes, and Stephanie Egger's able to take her down and work her ground and pound and win the fight that way. So I think Mazany follows the same game plan and doesn't get tired like she does towards the end of that Priscilla Cachoeira fight. She's able to win this fight. I'm gonna go Gina Mazany to bank 2 rounds early, win this fight by unanimous decision. All right, next up we have got 2 fighters looking for their first win in the UFC, and that's like kind of a common theme in this UFC card, or on this UFC card. But we got Mike Breeden taking on Levy. So of course, Glory MMA and Fitness's own Mike Breeden is 0-1 so far in the UFC. Comes in short notice, takes on Anthony Hernandez, or excuse me, not Fluffy Hernandez, Alexander Hernandez, and Alexander the Great Hernandez knocks him out in the first round. I mean, kind of what you expected, as Hernandez, like when Alexander Hernandez fights these like not great like entry-level UFC fighters, he wins. Like, he wins by impressive first round knockout. The fights I'm looking at is Chris Gritzmacher and Mike Breeden, but then when he fights guys who are like borderline top 15 and Dober, Moises, and Moicano, he loses. That's just kind of the way Alexander Hernandez's career is kind of gone. Same when you look at the Cowboy fight, with the exception of when he beat Beneil Dariush. Alexander Hernandez has not really risen to the occasion when he's taken on great guys. But Mike Breeden loses to Hernandez, and that's really been his UFC run so far. He was fighting in FAC a lot. Of course, the promotion ran by James Krause. He won 2 fights over there. He had a shot on the Contender Series, lost to Anthony Romero in a fight where Romero kind of just beat him everywhere. I mean, it was just a striking, it was basically a striking fight for the entire fight. Romero does shoot for a couple takedowns, doesn't really land any, but it's Romero outstriking Breeden to winning to victory. And now Romero is fighting right now in Fury FC. I think his fight's coming up right now. I mean, I'm recording this about 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, and I think, yeah, Romero's on the main card. That starts about 2:30, so coming up pretty soon. I'm assuming Anthony Romero's going to win. He's taking on Kenneth Glenn, a guy who's 10-9, so I'm assuming Romero's going to win that fight. But yeah, exactly. Mike Breeden loses to Anthony Romero, and Romero's still fighting in Fury FC. So that's concerning. Natan Levy, you know what he's good at. He's good at getting fights to the ground, winning him down there. He did take down Rafa Garcia 3 times, but could not keep any control time. And Rafa Garcia is pretty good on the ground. I feel like I pick against Rafa Garcia all the time. Hell, I picked Jesse Ronson to beat him, but Rafa Garcia is pretty damn good. Like, I mean, as I've continued to watch this guy is getting better. And Natan Levy losing to Garcia, honestly, I don't think that there's anything bad in that. I think if he's able to get takedowns though against Breeden, I think he should be fine. I just think Garcia was a tough entry-level UFC fight for him. Now he's taking on a guy in Breeden who I think is below him. If Breeden is able to keep the fight standing, though, he should be able to, outstrike Levy. But I think Natan Levy's going to be able to get this one on the ground. And if he's able to do that, give me Natan Levy by decision all day long. Really interesting fight now. We've got Gabe Green taking on Johan Lainesse. For Gabe Green, 1-1 now in the UFC after picking up that pretty good win against Phil Rowe back in February of 2021. We haven't seen him since, though. It's been a while since Green has fought, but in that Phil Rowe fight, looks pretty good. Knocks down Phil Rowe a couple times in that fight. The 2 exchange takedowns and, ground control time, but it's a unanimous decision win for Gabe Green. It's a pretty gutsy victory. He wins it 2-1 most cards. I think one judge had him winning all 3, but it's a good win for Gabe Green. Before that, he fought in Vegas on the Woodley Burns card. He lost to Daniel Rodriguez, but D-Rod's really damn good, and I think highly of Daniel Rodriguez. I don't know when he's fighting again, because, I mean, hell, you look at Preston Parsons, looked very good in his last fight just last night, and, Daniel Rodriguez kind of melted Preston Parsons in their fight. We need to see Daniel Rodriguez back in the octagon more often. I mean, he fought 3 times in 2021, and he has not been heard of since he beat Kevin Lee. Like, we need Daniel Rodriguez to fight more, but Gabe Green loses to Rodriguez, no shame in that. D-Rod's really damn good on the feet, and it was just, a battle back and forth on the feet, but Rodriguez probably does win every single round of that fight. And then when you look at Green's opponent here, Johan Lainesse, Lainesse is coming off back-to-back knockout victories. The first one being a Cage Fury championship victory, winning the welterweight title over there for Evan Cutts, beating him in the second round, really worked the body well in that fight. And then his last fight over Justin Burlinson, knocked him out in the first round, left hook, put him down. The fight barely got going, and Lainesse, got his way into the UFC. The guy's got a lot of power. It's that simple. I mean, most of his finishes are in the first round. The only one that wasn't was when he won that CFFC welterweight championship, finishing him in the second round. ground. But again, Lainesse is really good. I mean, this guy's got heavy power, heavy shots. His wrestling hasn't been tested much, honestly, because he hasn't been able to, be in the octagon or be in just the cage at all, because he is able to just get his opponents out of there really quickly. And that's where I think Gabe Green will be able to test him some, because Green can scrap on the feet, he can scrap on the ground as well. Makes for an all-around good fight here. So I think Lainesse will definitely be tested a lot, because Gabe Green is more than just an entry-level guy in the UFC. Of course, he beat Rowe, and now Rowe does have the victory over Jason Witt, but Witt isn't great, but still, Gabe Green does own a win in the UFC. It's a pretty good win over Rowe. It's a back-and-forth fight at UFC 258. I think this one's really competitive. Honestly, I think this is one of the closer ones on the card. I mean, there's a reason the odds are so close in this one. You're looking at Lainesse -105, Green at -115. Ever so slightly, I will go Lainesse, though. I think he will be able to land that big power shot in the first round, and if he is, and he's able to, keep the fight on the feet and work his power shots and really connect early against Green, he should be able to win. So I'm going to go with Johan Lainesse to beat Gabe Green by first round knockout. I could definitely see, though, Green going there and grinding out a decision victory, or even just, putting away Lainesse late into the fight. I could see that too, but I'll lean towards Lainesse putting Green away early, and I'll go first round knockout for Johan Lainesse. Now we've got a flyweight matchup between Francisco Figueiredo and Daniel da Silva, or is it Lacerda now? I'm not completely sure, because I see on the UFC website that they have Lacerda, Tapology, and Wikipedia still have da Silva. I'm not completely sure. Whatever, I'm going to refer to him as both. All right, so Daniel da Silva taking on Francisco Figueiredo. For Figueiredo, we haven't seen him in a while. His last fight was that loss to Malcolm Gordon. Actually, it feels like it was longer ago, but it was in the summer of last year. Dropping that fight by unanimous decision. Figueiredo was a huge favorite going into that one, because of course he is the brother of Dawson Figueiredo. And I'm not completely sure where Francisco Figueiredo does have his camp for this one. I think it's still in Brazil. I don't think he's at fight ready like Dawson is, the champion is now. But for Francisco Figueiredo, comes into that Malcolm Gordon fight, he loses. Malcolm X Gordon gets him by unanimous decision, and honestly, it's just Gordon's outstriking him. Gordon outworks him on the ground. Like every single point in that fight, it was Malcolm Gordon outworking Francisco Figueiredo, and that was a fight where, again, you thought Francisco Figueiredo was just going to go in there, and I wouldn't think steamroll Malcolm Gordon, but Gordon to that point in the UFC was 0-2, he loses to Amir Albazi, he loses to Sumidarji where he gets knocked down in a minute, and you're thinking, okay, well, Albazi submits him, Midarji KOs him. How is Francisco Figueiredo going to beat him? But it doesn't matter, because Figueiredo is going to be able to beat him wherever he wants to fight. He couldn't, and Malcolm X Gordon now is on a 2-fight winning streak in the UFC after he beat Dennis Bondar in his last one earlier in this year. But Figueiredo loses that one. His first fight in the UFC, though, it's a matchup with Jerome Rivera. Now, Rivera wasn't great in the UFC. He took that fight against Figueiredo. It was early in 2021. He just came off the knockout loss to Tyson Nam, and for Rivera, he went 0-4 in the UFC, and we haven't seen him fighting in MMA since. But Figueiredo just beats him to the punch everywhere. Figueiredo is able to out-wrestle Rivera, he's able to outstrike Rivera, but it really was the wrestling and the ground attack and the groundwork that Figueiredo did do in that fight that propelled him to victory. So that was good in that fight from Figueiredo. Look at his opponent here in Daniel Lacerda. Lacerda, coming off a couple wins over in Brazil, that's how he got his way into the UFC. But it was kind of a confusing signing, honestly, for me, when they brought in Lacerda, because, he had 3 straight wins, and yeah, triangle choke, armbar, KO. He's winning in shoot, though, but he's not fighting the best guys. I know the UFC is looking for flyweights, and I was surprised they didn't bring him in on the Contender Series, but then he takes on, Jeff Molina, and Molina finishes him in the second round. But Jeff Molina, I think a lot of people are seeing that guy's really damn good, and now he's going to take on Zhalgas Zhumagulov in a couple months, and I'm really excited for that fight, because I think Molina's got a real serious chance to win that fight over a real... maybe Zhumagulov's not in the top 15 in the UFC, but a real talented flyweight in Zhalgas, and I think that's a really fun fight for Molina. But for da Silva, he just gets finished in the second round. But Jeff Molina's got power at 125, and he's really quick for the weight class too. That especially even for 125, Molina's quick. That you just don't see a lot. So da Silva gets knocked down that fight. No shame in that. But when you look at this one with da Silva and Figueiredo, obviously, Lacerda's trying to get this one on the ground. I think, his bottom game and his jiu-jitsu is good. He does have some, good striking as well. But all around, both these guys are good on the feet and on the ground. Tough to get a read on this one, though, honestly, because you just don't know how good Lacerda is. And same with Figueiredo, too, because, okay, yeah, he beats Jerome Rivera, but Rivera's not in the UFC anymore. And then he loses to Malcolm Gordon, who is 2-2, but owns a loss. He has lost back-to-back fights before the Figueiredo fight. And then we look at da Silva. Again, he's only had one UFC fight. It's to Jeff Molina. He loses. And then his fights outside the UFC aren't, the most impressive, and they're really kind of tough to find on the internet too. So I don't know. I'm gonna take Francisco Figueiredo just because I think I can trust Figueiredo more because of the Jerome Rivera win. I'm gonna take him by decision. I'm not too confident at all. I think Figueiredo is better on the ground, even though Lacerda is good at getting submissions as well. On the feet, I think is very evenly matched. And I'll go Francisco Figueiredo ever so slightly by unanimous decision. So I don't know exactly where this fight's gonna be on the card, but I'll put it right here. This fight's not competitive at all. Chase Sherman, Alexander Romanov. Now we were supposed to get this fight last week. Of course, Sherman pulled out like 2 hours before the fight happened. He had a minor health scare, the UFC was saying, so I don't know entirely what that entails, but he's able to fight 7 days later, so couldn't be too bad. I'm hoping for the best for Chase Sherman, though, because he's just going to get mauled in this fight. My goodness. I mean, it was so confusing when the UFC put this together. It was so confusing. Because, okay, Romanov's supposed to take on, originally Leo Latifi. That fight never happened. He was supposed to take on Tanner Boser, and he was a huge favorite over Boser, and it was just, okay, cool. He's probably going to run right through Boser. Now you're taking on Chase Sherman, and okay, this is a guy who got subbed by Jake Collier, and Collier we're going to talk about a little bit later when he's fighting on Arlovski, but again, Sherman got beat by Jake Collier. He got taken down, subbed by Jake Collier in 2 minutes, and now he's going to take on a guy who doesn't strike at all. You're just taking a guy who purely just wrestles and purely looks to take guys down, slam them hard on the ground, and try to submit or work his ground and pound. Alexander Romanov is the death matchup for a lot of these guys at the weight class, and it just so happens to be that Chase Sherman's one of these guys in the weight class that matches up horribly with Alexander Romanov. Romanov matches up horribly. A lot of guys would match up horribly with Romanov, but especially Chase Sherman. Especially. Because if you get subbed by Jake Collier in 2 minutes, what is Alexander Romanov going to do to him? I think the more interesting part of this fight is does Romanov win this one by KO or does he win it by submission? Because that's the question I have. Does he sub Sherman once he gets to the ground, or does he just ground and pound him like he did to Vandera? I don't know. Or does he try to, stick his forearm into his throat like he did against De Lima? Romanov's good. And you look at his pictures that the UFC took of him before the fight with Sherman this week, before it was supposed to happen, the guy slimmed down a lot. The guy is not, he's still a big guy, but, really slimmed down. Of course, he used to be a super heavyweight back when he fought outside the UFC. The guy used to weigh 300 pounds fighting MMA fights when he's fighting an Eagle fighting championship, not EFC. But yeah, our Eagles fighting championship's not the one that Habib runs, obviously. It's a Moldovan promotion, of course, is where Romanov's from. But the guy's really slimmed down, and I think he's just gonna be basically the same fighter, but I think he's gonna have a better gas tank. Considering you look at the Juan Espino fight, he definitely was gassing. And that's been the one fight where we're thinking, okay, maybe Romanov's not the guy we thought he was. But he looked good in the Vandera fight, and obviously we're not gonna know how good he is coming off the Chase Sherman fight, because Sherman, again, it's not the best UFC fighter. He was cut from the promotion. Now he's been brought back. He was gonna go do some bare knuckle or whatnot, but now he's back in the UFC for 4 fights because he's stuck his hand out there and said he'd fight Romanov on short notice. UFC knows what they're doing. Romanov's gonna go to 5-0 in the UFC. I think he's gonna submit Sherman, kind of like what our guy Jake Collier did. I think it's takedown, submission, that's it. Romanov's not gonna throw a punch on the feet because it's not what he does. He throws punches when he gets to the ground. Yeah, Alexander Romanov by absolute mauling. There's a reason this guy's a minus 1,500 favorite and Sherman's plus 850 coming back. Again, Alexander Romanov, first round submission, first round mauling. That damn simple. So since the man got knocked out twice in a row in back-to-back fights, Meerschaert's been on a damn roll. My goodness, 2020 was not kind to Meerschaert. Beats Duran win, sure, but 2020 was not kind to him. He gets knocked out by Ian Heinisch in a minute in June of that year, and then he gets knocked out by Khamzat Chimaev in 17 seconds, and you're thinking, okay, maybe this is the end for Meerschaert. He's getting kind of up in there in age. He's 34. Okay, he's been fighting for a while, though. He's 34-14. The record is now for Meerschaert. Then he goes and then he subs Bartosz Fabinski in 2 minutes. Okay, didn't think that was gonna happen. I'll be honest with you. I thought Fabinski was gonna knock him out, kind of like what those other two guys did, but he didn't. And then when Meerschaert fought Makhmud Muradov, I don't think anyone thought Meerschaert was gonna win that fight. He was a huge underdog, and he submits Makhmud Muradov. And Muradov at the time was a really hyped up guy. Meerschaert was coming in that fight plus 440 as an underdog. He beat him. He subbed him in the second round by rear naked choke. And now you're thinking, okay, his next fight against Dawson Stulfsis, he's finally the favorite. Stulfsis isn't the greatest, and Dawson Stulfsis is beating Meerschaert for the first 2 rounds, and it's finally thinking, okay, now the winning run for Meerschaert's catching up to him. Nope, in the 3rd round he's down 2-0, but still in the 3rd round he finds a way to the back and he submits Dustin Stulfsis, even though he was down 2-0, and he continues the winning streak. So Meerschaert, the late career resurgence of the man at GM3. It's been all about the grappling. Last 2 fights, all 3 submission victories. And he's looked very good in those first 2 fights. In the Stulfsis fight, okay, he wasn't really able to get the fight to the ground, and Stulfsis just kind of was, beating him on the ground. He was, applying that top pressuring, and Meerschaert couldn't get going off his back, but eventually found an opportunity, took the back, submitted him, fight over. Meerschaert only needs you to make 1 mistake, and he can, finish you on the ground. So Meerschaert's really good on the ground. That's what we know, obviously, with him. He's taking on Krzysztof Jotko, and Jotko in his last fight had that win over Misha Serkinov. it's a close fight. I scored it for Cirkunov. I think a lot of people scored for Cirkunov, but you know, Chris Lee was a judge, and Sal Diamano was a judge, and Jotko won the fight. But Cirkunov was able to go to the ground a couple times in that fight. He was 5 for 17 in his takedown attempts, about 4.5 minutes of control time in that fight for Misha Cirkunov. And you know, I thought Cirkunov won round 3. I thought Cirkunov won round 1, but they didn't give it to him. That's besides the point. But, you know, Cirkunov was able to go to the ground in that fight. He was kind of able to outstrike Jotko a little bit in the first round, too, and that's the thing, the deciding round. I give the first round to Cirkunov. I don't know. I mean, could have gone either way. But, you know, Meerschaert's not a very good striker. I mean, you know what Meerschaert's trying to do. Meerschaert is trying to get the fight on the ground. The thing is, does Jotko possess that one-punch knockout power that can put away Jared Meerschaert like what Ian Heinisch did and like what Khamzat Chimaev did? No. Krzysztof Jotko, I mean, when's the last time he knocked anyone out in the UFC? You got to go way back to 2016. I mean, we knocked out Tamden McCory. I forgot that dude existed, okay? So that's the only time Jotko's ever scored a knockout victory in the UFC. That was on McDonald and Thompson. I believe that was in Canada, I think. Yeah, that's the only time he's got to finish in the UFC. So for Jotko, he's gonna have to win a decision. But that's tough to do against a guy like Jared Meerschaert, because again, we talk about Meerschaert, he only needs to make one mistake on the ground. If he catches you slipping once, he's going to take your back and he's going to submit you, like what he's done against Muradov, what he did against Stolfsus, like what Fabinski, he just got him with a guillotine, but still, again, the guy is really good on the ground. He's got 26 submission victories for a reason. And that's why I think he's going to beat Krzysztof Jotko, because I just don't think Jotko's the type of guy that can beat Meerschaert. And if Meerschaert is still sitting at this plus 145, I have this right here, yeah, hammer that. I think Jared Meerschaert's going to find a way to beat Krzysztof Jotko. I think if we keep the winning streak alive with them, again, Jotko's only got to make one mistake. Meerschaert can't get this one on the ground. I think he's able to take it back. I think he'll be able to find a submission. And I like Jared Meerschaert to go in there, submit Krzysztof Jotko in the second round, going second round submission for GM3, Jared Meerschaert, to continue his winning streak of 4 wins in the UFC. And the damage is back, and he's taking on Tristan Connelly. So Elkins lost his last fight to Cub Swanson. Tristan Connelly lost his last fight to Pat Sabatini. Someone's got to win this one. And for Tristan Connelly, I don't still to this day know how he beat Michel Pereira. And the way he beat Michel Pereira made me think that he was going to beat Pat Sabatini, and I feel awfully stupid now, because Pat Sabatini is a dog, dude. That guy is good. I picked him ever since that Connelly fight. He's won 3 straight fights. I've rode the success of Pat Sabatini since the Connelly fight. But yeah, I just don't understand Tristan Connelly beat Michel Pereira, because I keep watching that fight, and it's just weird, because Connelly's striking, just, I don't know how to explain it. It's not traditional. It's not, I don't know. It just doesn't look that, I don't know how to put it. It's just, he's got a weird striking game. Like, his strikes don't look like they are going to connect all the time, and it's just not an orthodox striking, like, strategy. I don't know. It doesn't look traditional at all. That's all I'm going to say. And now you're taking on Darren Elkins, who's going to get in your face and going to make it a barn burner. Like, that's how Darren Elkins fights. He won't get into your face. He will make you throw back. And honestly, because the way you saw Connelly fight Michel Pereira, though, is Pereira was getting in his face. Pereira was doing all that crazy stuff. And I think now Michel Pereira has definitely toned down all those backflips and whatnot in the octagon. I mean, I think he's a lot better now. But, yeah, it was just looking back at that Connelly Pereira fight. I'm just, where did that guy go? I know he only fought one fight against Sabatini, and Sabatini was able to take down Connelly. He even knocked down Connelly in that fight. But, I mean, it was just a pretty big beat down that Pat Sabatini gave Tristan Connelly in that one. If the Connelly begin the Pereira fight, though, shows up this fight against Darren Elkins, it's going to be a crazy fight. Because all Darren Elkins needs to start bleeding, he just needs to be like, you know, you just gotta like touch his face once. Like if he just gets slapped, he's gonna start bleeding all over the place. So it always makes for crazy fights because the octagon's gonna have a crap ton of blood on the mat. But yeah, I mean, you know how Darren Elkins fights, so he's gonna get into your face. He's gonna make it a war on the feet. I mean, you look at the Nate Landwehr fight. That's the last fight that we got out of Elkins. That was crazy. Now, when you look at the fight that when he beat Eduardo Garagori, he was able to get the fight on the ground, and thus he did implement a very wrestling-heavy style game plan in that one to beat Garagori, and he subbed him in the 3rd round. And you look at the Derek Minner fight, well, you know, Elkins just kind of did the same thing to Minner. Minner was looking for takedowns in that fight. He did get him down the 1st round, in the 2nd, got back to the feet. You know, Elkins really put it on Minner and eventually finished him late in that 2nd round. I picked Minner to win the fight. Didn't go our way. And the Cub Swanson fight, well, he just couldn't get going. It's Cub Swanson. I mean, I think everyone kind of knew going in that one. Cub's got a little bit more left in the tank than Darren Elkins has got. And Cub was just kind of putting it on Darren Elkins, and eventually it got him the spinning wheel kick. So that's how Cub Swanson beat Darren Elkins. Do I think Elkins has still got a little bit more left in the tank than Tristan Connelly? I don't know, because Connelly, again, since coming to the UFC, he's fought twice in 3 years. And now he's taking on Elkins, who, he's the damage for a reason. He's going to get in your face. He's going to make it a war. I think Connelly will be able to throw some volume back at Elkins, but I think he's going to fall into the trap that Elkins wants him to fall into, is that crazy barn burner on the feet, and then if Elkins has to, he can go on the ground and try to submit him like he did to Garagori. If he has to, he does get into any trouble on the feet, but yeah, I think Darren Elkins is going to win. I think the damage keeps on winning in the UFC. I'm going to say he's going to beat Tristan Connelly by unanimous decision. Okay, so Jared Gordon taking on Grant Dawson, and if Grant Dawson had won the fight against Rick Glenn and just had a mediocre third round against Ricky Glenn, I'd be so confident in Grant Dawson beating Jared Gordon. But my goodness, that third round that Grant Dawson had against Ricky Glenn was so bad that it's tough to pick him in this fight. Like, okay, now he's a favorite. He's still, what, 17-1-1. He's only got one loss. But my goodness, that one loss was absolutely horrible. Or that one round was absolutely horrible against Rick Glenn. Because he's winning the fight. All right, first round against Ricky Glenn, he's able to land takedowns. He's got enough for 4 minutes of that 5 in the first round. Okay, cool. Same with the second. 4 minutes of control time for Grant Dawson against Ricky Glenn. You're thinking, okay, as long as he just, doesn't get finished in the third round, he's going to win. In the third round, Ricky Glenn gets him to the mat, and my goodness, he has him down there for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Grant Dawson does nothing off his back in that round. He gets outstruck 66-2 in that round, and it's a 10-8. Ricky Glenn ties up the fight. It's 28-28. It's a majority decision. Great. Like, I mean, my goodness, dude. That Grant Dawson in the third round, the way Grant Dawson fought in the third round was so bad. I hope he's got it figured out. I hope he does, because Jared Gordon's a tough guy to put away. Like, Jared Gordon is going to be in the fight. And, like, yeah, I got finished by Oliveira. Yeah, I got finished by Joaquim Silva. Yeah, I got finished by Diego Ferreira. But still, Gordon's going to be there. If you don't put him away early, Gordon's going to be there late in the fight. That's what Jared Gordon's got. Jared Gordon is a guy who will finish hard. You look at the fights against Chris Fishgold, Chavez, Selecki. He's there at the end of those fights. And yeah, Selecki takes him down 4 times in their fight, but still, Gordon's there at the end of the fight, still pushing a pace. The Danny Chavez fight, Gordon's just kind of dominating that one, honestly. And then you look at the Chris Fishgold fight, that was one that he had Paul Felder in his corner, and Gordon's just able to out-wrestle Fishgold for 15 minutes, really. And where is Chris Fishgold now? Does that guy still fight? Like, is he out the UFC now? I'm assuming he's out the UFC. Anyways, yeah, so Jared Gordon, he's always going to be in the fight, and we'll see. We'll see if he can fend off the wrestling of Grant Dawson, because you know what Grant Dawson does well. He's a really good wrestler, and you saw that in the Glenn fight, obviously, and that's really all I want to talk about with Grant Dawson is the Ricky Glenn fight, because I don't think any of those other fights matter, because all of Dawson's other fights in the UFC established one point. It's that, yes, he's a very good wrestler, and early in the fights, he is able to do well. And even late in the fights, in the Nandi Armani fight and the Leonardo Santos fight, he's doing well. The Santos fight, he finished him with the second left in the fight. And I think the commentators thought that Dawson needed that finish to win the fight, even though I think everyone else thought he was already up 2-0 to that point in the fight. But, yeah, I mean, the guy was, his gassing looked good in those last 2 fights. I just don't know what happened in the Ricky Glenn fight. I mean, he kind of went for it early in the fight, but yeah, I don't know. He banked those first 2 rounds, and then he got completely dominated in the third. Like, will he still be able to beat Gordon? I think he should be able to. I think if Grant Dawson comes in there with his wrestling heavy approach and just doesn't completely gas after those first 2 rounds, yeah, he should be able to beat Jared Gordon, and Grant Dawson should win. But again, it's just so concerning considering his last fight against Ricky Glenn. But Gordon does well. He's good on the ground, and his last couple fights he has shown the offensive wrestling, but he is pretty solid on the feet as well when you look at the fights. Even when he lost to Joaquim Silva, I mean, the guy was putting in some damage in that fight before he got finished by Silva in the third. We look at the Danny Chavez fight, pure domination on the ground, on the feet, and the Selecki fight is pretty close, but Jordan Gordon, where he's having his most success, is on the feet, and Selecki's trying to get that fight on the ground. That was all the way back in October of last year on Santos and Walker. But I gotta pick Grant Dawson here. I'm not confident. If he beat Rick Glenn and he just didn't look horrible in the third round and he just won 2-1 in that fight, I would be very confident, and I guarantee the odds would be like minus 300 right now for Grant Dawson because of his undefeated run so far. And I don't know why I have his record as 5-1-1 on the screen right now. He did not lose in the UFC. Just putting it out there. He lost in Kansas Fighting Alliance back in 2016. So he's not 5-1-1 in the UFC. I believe he is 6-0-1, I think, in the UFC. I don't know how I got that wrong, but the guy's really good. I think he's 5-0-1 in the UFC, on that record in the top right. But I think Dawson should be able to win. Again, I'd be more confident if that last fight didn't end the way it did. But I think Dawson was able to implement that wrestling strategy, and get all the takedowns in this fight. He should be able to beat Gordon. He should be able to win those first 2 rounds, and hopefully he doesn't get 10-8 in the third. Go and Grant Dawson win this one by decision. So interesting matchmaking here between Andre Touchy-Fili and Joanderson Brito. Because Andre Touchy-Fili looked really good in his last fight against Dino Pineda, and Pineda's a guy who, I mean, yeah, sure, he got knocked out by Cub Swanson, but to that point he was looking pretty good. And the Fili fight, I mean, with Pineda, Fili just beat him everywhere. I mean, it's a pretty dominant performance by Andre Fili. He's going to finish Pineda in that second round until, I mean, Mike Jackson, Dean Barry pokes him in the eye. And now it wasn't like the intentional eye poke. He didn't like dig his finger into his eye like Dean Barry did against Mike Jackson, but it kind of just like barely touched the eye of Pineda. Pineda says he can't finish the fight. Okay, he was going to get knocked out if he kept going, so I kind of get why Pineda, bowed out of that fight, but Fili was well on his way to victory in that fight. That was all the way back in June of 2021 on the Gan Volkov card, so it was back in the summer last year, where Fili's got that fight with Pineda. Before that fight, though, for Fili, he loses to Bryce Mitchell in a fight where Mitchell just outworks him on the ground like Mitchell does to everybody. I mean, Fili just couldn't get going because Bryce Mitchell just grounded him, kind of like what, he did to Edson Barbosa. And by the way, give me Charles Air Jordan versus Edson Barbosa, please. I mean, Jordan called him out. I'm so down. Let's do that fight, please. And he said, yeah, one of us is going to die. I think we both want to die in the octagon, so someone's going to die. Let's do it. Which is a little bit concerning, but please give me Charles Jordan versus Edson Jr. Barbosa. But anyway, for Fili, he loses to Mitchell. He beats Charles Jordan, where he beats him on ICAL. He beats by split decision. Now, I'm kind of under the belief that Charles Jordan wins that fight, but still, I think very highly of both guys. I'm one of the conductors of the Charles Jordan hype train, and get on board right now because that guy is going to be very good submitting Gru Yunada in his last fight. My goodness, Charles Jordan is the man. Fili loses to Sodiq Yusuff before that, but Sodiq Yusuff's one of the top up-and-coming guys in the weight class. He beats Shimon Moraes. He beats Miles Jury, loses to Michael Johnson. That weird fight where maybe he won. I thought Johnson won. It's on Gagey Vic, and the rest has been history for Fili. He came into the UFC, of course. Fought Max Holloway's second fight. He's had a lot of fights in the UFC. And what Fili does really well, he's good on the feet. As you saw, he's beating the brakes off Pineda. If he has to go to the ground, he can, like he did against Jordan, like he did against Sodiq Yusuff. But when he's taking on a guy like Joe Anderson Brito, a guy who's really just built. I mean, look at Joe Anderson Brito. Look at him on the screen right now. That guy is big for a 145 pounder. Like the guy's huge for 145. And now his last fight against Bill Algeo, though, Algeo beats him. It's just Algeo outstriking him. It's Algeo outworking him on the ground. And just all around, Algeo, I mean, you probably give the first round to Algeo too, even though Jordan Brito is able to get the fight on the ground, but doesn't really do anything with his positioning once he does get it to the mat. The second round for Algeo, it's Algeo working on the ground. It's Algeo striking. The same can be said in the third. The only close round in the fight is the first. You can give it. I give it to Algeo, but you can give it to Brito too. I can see, but the second and third was definitely Algeo outstriking Brito and outworking him on the ground. And if I think if Bill Algeo was able to beat Joe Anderson Brito, I think Andre Fili is going to be able to beat Joe Anderson Brito as well. Unless Brito lands a bomb, and at least or Brito catches him in a submission, which I doubt he will. It should be all Andre Touchy Fili winning this fight. I think Fili should be able to beat him on the feet. If he has to go to the ground and work his takedowns, I think he should be able to do so, like he did against Charles Jordan, like he did against Sodiq Yusuff. I know he didn't beat Yusuff when he went to the ground, but still, he had that opportunity in that fight. And I know Yusuff, once he did get him to the ground, did feel that Yusuff was able to reverse positioning and all that through transitions, but still. I think if Fili, needs to take it to the ground, I think he can beat Brito down there. If he wants it on the feet, which I think he's going to want it on the feet, I think he should be able to beat Brito up there as well. I'm going Andre Touchy Fili to win this one by decision. I could even see a finish late of him getting Brito down there late in the fight, but I'll go unanimous decision victory for Andre Fili. I think he's just all around better than Brito unless he gets caught in a submission or gets caught with a big shot. I think this should be close to a lock for Fili. I won't call it a lock because I think Brito does have a chance to win this one, but yeah, Andre Fili by decision. So Andre Arlovski's back in another co-main event, taking on yet another heavyweight who's rising up the ranks but is not yet in the top 15. I feel like this is a theme. Andre Arlovski's 10 years older than his opponent, and he's taking on a guy who doesn't have that much knockout power, and it'll probably go to decision. You know what probably happens. Like, Andre Arlovski's just beating guys by decision. Unless he takes on a killer, which he has a lot in his career. But unless he takes on a killer like Ospinall, Rosenstruik, Tai Tuivasa, Francis Ngannou, Josh Barnett, Overeem, Stipe, he wins the fight. Like, I think he wins this one. I think it's the biggest lock on the card. Okay, now, we look at Andre Arlovski's last 5 decision wins. Last 5 wins, they're all by decision. It's Felipe Lins, who at the time was an up-and-coming heavyweight. We thought, okay, Lins who just beat Marcin Prachnio. His last fight, he's coming from PFL. He's the PFL champion. Maybe he beats Andre Arlovski. No, Arlovski technically outstrikes him for 3 rounds. And what Arlovski's done his last how many ever fights, he's barely beat his opponents by barely outstriking him in each round. And he'll barely outstrike him in 2 rounds, bank those 2 rounds, and kind of take the third off, or actually, no, it's kind of been the game plan. He'll win the first 2 barely and then kind of take the third one off and, drop the third but win 2-1. Okay, Felipe Lins, he outstrikes him. He outstrikes him 50-41. In that fight, though, he kind of won all 3 because Felipe Lins was very disappointing heading into the UFC. Now, the Tanner Boser fight, I can make the case Tanner Boser wins that one, but still, Arlovski wins 2-1. Boom, there you have it. The Ospinall fight, okay, it's going to happen. Tom Ospinall's a top 5 heavyweight. That's not going to talk about that. Chase Sherman when Andre Arlovski beats him, okay? Arlovski in the first round. Doesn't look the greatest, but I mean, sure. This one's different because he does lose the first round of Sherman, but the second and third, he beats Sherman in those 2. Because Sherman's a guy who's a fast starter. Like, he is able to get knockouts early in his fights, even though we kind of crapped on when we were talking about him and Romanov. But still, Arlovski in the second and third was able to turn on and won those last 2, won the fight 2 rounds to 1. Carlos Felipe sees some success at the end of the fight, but Andre Arlovski's work in the first rounds did enough for him to get the victory. The third round, it doesn't really matter. Jared Vanderaa, that fight, okay, I don't know how's a split decision. I saw that pretty easily, 2-1 for Andre Arlovski because he won the first round, he won the second round, that was a turning round, and the third round, Vanderaa wins, but it doesn't matter because Arlovski's already banked 2 rounds. Andre Arlovski knows what he's doing at this point in his career. He's 43 years old. He does not take too much damage because he is able to get out the way out of most shots, and if you don't have a heavyweight in there that has a lot of power that can put him out early in the fight, he'll win. Jake Collier does not have much power. Okay, Collier's a solid guy, but Jake Collier has what? Doesn't have a knockout finish in the UFC to the head. I mean, right? Okay, because Arlovski's 43 years old. Guys at Arlovski's age probably shouldn't be taking too much damage to the head. You shouldn't be taking much head damage if you are a guy of Andre Arlovski's age. It's just that simple. But Jake Collier hasn't been able to knock anybody out in the UFC. He's got a TKO finish with a spitting back kick, but that was when he's all the way back at 185. At heavyweight, Jake Collier, he's fought Tom Ospinall. He got knocked down in 45 seconds. He beat Jan Vellante, but Jan Vellante, let's be honest, kind of sucks at this point in true. Jan Vellante at heavyweight sucked, okay? Carlos Felipe is a split decision loss. Collier probably wins that fight, but Felipe gets lucky, whatever. He couldn't finish Felipe. And then Chase Sherman, he subs him. Okay, cool. You're not subbing Andre Arlovski. I don't think so, because Collier's not known for his jiu-jitsu. It's just that Chase Sherman sucks so much in the ground that's how Collier was able to beat him down there. Right? So I don't think he's going to do that to Arlovski. You're going to see a technical striking affair for 15 minutes. Andre Arlovski's going to win the first 2 rounds. He'll lose the third. He'll win this one 2 rounds to 1, and he'll win yet another fight. Andre Arlovski's going to keep breaking all these records at heavyweight because he'll keep fighting these guys who are like top 25 level guys who Andre Arlovski should be able to beat, because Arlovski, let's be honest, is like top 15. He's like number 13 in the weight class. Like, I think he's better than Sergey Pavlovich. I think he's better than Shamil Durakimov. He's better than those guys, but they keep booking him against these low-level heavyweights, hoping that one of these guys can propel their name or, boost their name off of Andre Arlovski, like what they did with Ngannou, like what they did with, Tabora, Tuivasa, Durakimov, Sakai, Rosenstruik, Ospinall, and what they were hoping to do with Lins, Boser, Sherman, Felipe, and Vanderaa, but they couldn't with the latter 5. So this is gonna be one of those fights again where Arlovski wins, he banks 2, takes the third off, he wins 2-1. Andre Arlovski wins yet another decision in the UFC, get him his 34th win in his pro career, get him his 23rd in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. The former champion gets it done again, going with the Pitbull by unanimous decision. Main event time. In his first main event appearance, it will be Marlon Chito Vera taking on Rob Font. And for Font, back-to-back main events for him because he's coming off the win over Cody Garbrandt. After he beats Marlon Moraes, who, let's be honest, Moraes kind of washed. He's retired now. Enjoy retirement, Marlon. But Cody Garbrandt, the win for Font, it's good. Now is Cody Garbrandt, what Cody Garbrandt used to be? He's not, but still, Rob Font beats him, just outstrikes him throughout that entire fight, and then he takes on Jose Aldo in his last main event. Now, Aldo, Rob Font out-volumes Aldo, but Aldo's able to, really beat Font with the power shots. Aldo's doing more damage with his strikes, and given he didn't strike as much as Font did in that one, his output wasn't the same as Font, but he was still able to hurt Font more than what Font was doing. Like, Font was putting on his volume against Aldo, but he just wasn't really hurting with any of his strikes, and Aldo was able to go to the well on the ground a couple times in that fight. He had 9 minutes of control time in that one. It did Jose Aldo Jr., and he beat Rob Font, but it was a good learning curve for Font, honestly, because, Rob Font, he is 34, he's getting kind of up there, but still, in his MMA career, still sort of young because he hasn't had too many fights in the UFC. He's only 24 pro fights, which, I think it's about the same as Chito Vera, but still, Font isn't as active as some of these other guys in the UFC, especially these high-level guys, but he's been more active recently for sure. I remember when he went from, when he beat Sergio Pettis 1 year, then beat Simone, then took a full year off, and then fought Moraes. Like, he fought 3 times in 3 Decembers in a row. And he won all 3 of those fights, by the way. And now he's, going the Garber and the Aldo fights. But Aldo should be a guy I think should be getting the next title shot. It would probably be Dillashaw, so I think they'll run Aldo and Dominic Cruz. But, Jose Aldo's a fight away from the belt. belt. If he beats Dominic Cruz, he'll get a title shot, or hell, if they just match him up with Aljo immediately, he will get the title shot. Now, I think Aljamain Sterling beats Jose Aldo. I think he beats TJ Dillashaw. I think he beats Dominic Cruz. So whatever one of the three he gets, I think he beats all of them. But I'm just saying, I think Aljamain Sterling's really damn good. But for Rob Font, the Aldo fight, again, he puts on the volume in that one. He isn't able to really hurt Aldo as much as he should have in that fight. And now he's taking on Marlon Chito Vera, who Vera is coming off back-to-back wins, and he fought Jose Aldo as well. It's a closer fight than you might think, because Vera does win around that fight. Chito Vera does win, I believe it was he wins the second in that one. Yeah, he wins the second round of that fight, because Aldo's able to go to the takedowns in the third. I gave the first round to Aldo out striking Vera, but Chito Vera probably wins the second. So you go in that third round tied 1-1, and then Aldo just goes to takedown and gets him down and holds him down basically for that entire third round, winning the fight. But, Chito has a pretty close competitive fight with Jose Aldo, who a guy that Rob Font kind of struggled with in his fight. So you look at Marlon Vera, though, his fights afterwards. He has the fight against Davey Grant where he beats him. It's a very fun fight. One of the better fights of last year. He wins that one by unanimous decision. The Frankie Edgar fight, he's on his way to probably win a decision. Instead, he's like, enough of that. He front kicks Frankie Edgar in the face, a la Lyoto Machida and Randy Couture, and puts him with that front kick. Kind of nasty. And Chito Vera wins the fight by knockout in the third. I doubt Frankie's done. I think Frankie's probably still fighting, but it was kind of sad to watch Frankie go out like that, especially because I had Frankie Edgar to win that one. I'm a big Answer fan, and he lost. So, but for Marlon Vera, of course, his big fight was the win over Sean O'Malley, the one where I think a lot of people realized how good Chito Vera was, because coming into that fight, he lost Song Yadong, and it was a close fight, and Song Yadong's really good in Jackson. That fight was in Jacksonville, and Song Yadong, again, one of the better younger fighters. The guy's on a roll right now, and Marlon Vera loses that one, but then he goes into the Sean O'Malley fight, really works his leg kicks well, really, I would just kind of takes the weight of the front leg of Sean O'Malley, doesn't allow O'Malley to get his footwork in. I mean, he just can't really move that much, and then Vera gets him down, finishes him with elbows, and puts away Sean O'Malley, giving O'Malley his only pro loss. But on this fight on the feet, I think it's really competitive on the feet. I like Rob Font's volume. Let's just see in this one, though, is he able to hurt Vera on the feet? Because that was the thing in his fight against Aldo. He just wasn't really able to hurt Jose Aldo, because I didn't really feel like Aldo was in any danger in that fight. And even the Cody Garbrandt fight, he's putting it on Garbrandt, but he doesn't really hurt Garbrandt all that much in that one. Like, he wobbles Garbrandt a couple times, but for the amount of strikes that he landed on Cody Garbrandt, you'd expect a little bit more damage to Cody, especially a guy in Cody Garbrandt who does get knocked out a lot. And Rob Font, had him for 5 minutes and was putting a lot of pressure on him, a lot of volume on him, and wasn't able to finish him in 5 rounds. And then Garbrandt goes down to 125 and gets knocked out by Kai Kara France in 3 minutes, right? Yes, Rob Font's very technically sound striker. He's a very good striker, but power-wise, he's not the greatest. And he knocks out Marlon Moraes, but Moraes, where his chin's at this point in his career, and he kind of just landed around the button against Moraes. I would say Chito Vera's definitely got more power than Rob Font, and if Chito Vera is able to, land a big shot, it could put Font in some danger, but we've never seen Marlon Vera in a 5-round environment. We have seen Font in his last 2 fights go the full 25 minutes. He's been in there in 25 with Garbrandt and 25 with Jose Aldo. So, I think that has to go somewhat into the advantage of Rob Font. But I do like Vera's ground game. I think if Vera is able to get this one to the ground, I think he does have the advantage down there. Obviously, the 10 submissions to his name, and that's how he did kind of, get his victory over Davey Grant. He did go the takedowns when he had to in that one. And when you look at the fight that he had against, when he beat Guido Canetti, he was able to go to the ground in that one. I'm trying to think of another fight where Vera was able to go to the well in the takedowns. But the one that does stand out is the Canetti fight, and then the other one, of course, against Davey Grant as well. But and he didn't really stay on the ground too much with Canetti, but he was able to switch things up when he did fight Guido, the winner now or the guy who does own a win now over Chris Moutinho. But again, on the ground, I would give the advantage to Vera. So if Vera does get in any trouble, I think he should be able to go to the well in the takedowns. But I don't think he's going to be in too much danger on the feet, because I don't think Rob Font hits very hard. Font's a good boxer, but again, when you go back to the Garbrandt fight, he isn't able to really hurt him as much as you would think Rob Font would be able to hurt Cody Garbrandt in a 25-minute fight. And the Aldo fight, he puts on a lot of volume, but isn't just able to rock Aldo all that much. Close fight, though, honestly, between these two. I'm going to take Rob Font at minus 150. I think Font should be able to win. I think he will be able to out-volume Vera on the feet. And I just think he's going to make it hard on Chito Vera to, work in his game against the pressure and the volume that that Rob Font will be bringing at him. So ever so slightly, I'm going with Rob Font to win a decision here. I think it'll be similar to the Garbrandt fight. I think Font's just going to be all over him. I think Vera will have his, moments of success, and I think Chito Vera will win some rounds. But ever so slightly, I got to go with Rob Font to win the main event here, beating Marlon Chito Vera by unanimous decision. And folks, that'll do it here for another UFC Fight Night preview and predictions. Of course, tomorrow, be on the lookout for our PFL Week 2 predictions. In the main event, we got Bruno Capoloza taking on Stuart Austin, and the next week, of course, UFC 274. What a pay-per-view card next week. I mean, just the top 3 fights in that card are absolutely insane. You're looking at Justin Gage, Charles Oliveira, looking at Thug Rose, Carlos Esparza, and you're looking at Michael Chandler and Tony Ferguson. UFC 274 from Phoenix next week is going to be insane, so look out for those predictions coming at you a week from today. But for now, Marlon Vera, Rob Font, the main event from the UFC Apex. So thank you for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more MMA here on the channel, and Mamba forever.